Thanks so much for staying with us tonight. I'm Juan Williams, in for Bill O'Reilly. And in the Factor follow-up segment tonight, as we've been reporting, violence in Chicago out of control. The murder rate in the Windy City is up 31% from last year. And now there's a growing call for President Obama to speak out about the violence in his adopted hometown. Take a look at this. It's the cover of a prominent black newspaper there asking the question, Mr. President, what's the deal? Why so long to speak out against Chicago violence? And Carol Marin, a columnist with the Chicago Sun-Times, wrote this week, quote, while it was important that the president went to Aurora, Colorado to comfort the victims of the massacre at a movie theater there, it's every bit as important that he do it here in his adopted home, in the city that gave birth to his presidency, the headquarters of his campaign, unquote. Joining us now from Chicago, Santita Jackson, a radio talk show host, and with us, Deneen Borelli, the author of the book Blacklash. Both are Fox News contributors. Let me begin with you, Santita, and say, is there any question in your mind that this is related to the breakdown of the black family?
You know, I think this is the breakdown of the American family. The fact is, a Northwestern University study in 2010 showed us that the gunshot deaths in urban America are roughly equal to that of the gunshot deaths in rural America. I think we've got to look at what is happening in our country. We have a violence epidemic that's rooted in joblessness, that's rooted in a breakdown in our social fabric, and I just don't think you can isolate it and just focus on the black community. You've got to look at the broader community.
But you look at the statistics, who's getting shot, who's doing the shooting, I don't think there's any question it's black on black crime. I mean, you got to acknowledge this.
No. You've got to acknowledge the 2010 study. We're entitled to our own opinions, but not our own set of facts. 2010, Northwestern University, the great university that is based here in Chicago, showed us that urban violence and rural violence are roughly the same when it comes to our children. It's just too many of our children are killing themselves or shooting each other. It's unacceptably high.
Deneen,
it's just not going to work.
Do you agree that the black family breakdown has nothing to do with this, lack of black men as role models in the community? I mean, it seems to me that there is a connection, but what do you think?
There is a connection. There is a breakdown in the black family because of the failures of the progressive policies. Look at what welfare did to black families many, many years ago, and even today, where you have individuals who are more dependent on the government instead of looking to themselves to be independent. But what we have is the black establishment they don't want to talk about the failures of the progressive policies, like high taxes, like failing public schools, high pregnancy rates. They don't want to talk about that because that will expose the failures of their policies and what they back, what they stand for. So what we need really is a hostile takeover of the black establishment. Hold them accountable for what they say and what they do, because they're doing it a disservice to the black community.
Santita, I want to get you on this because I want to hear
Christian-like.
I want to ask you if you agree that there's some people, black leaders, who just don't want to deal with the problems in the black community, especially when it comes to high rates of out-of-wedlock births, children who don't have dads, no role models. Do you think there are people who say, let's not talk about that?
No, not when I'm in the black church and I'm a product of the African-American church. These are discussions that we have all the time. But I think that pathologizing black people really misses the point. This wave of black-on-black crime was white-on-white crime in 1890 to 1930 in Chicago, when you had a wave of white European immigrants who came here and who were forced into slums, who had no jobs, whose life options were cut. Dennis Blair, the former head of our intelligence agency, said that this economic crisis in which we find ourselves would rip the social fabric, and that is what we're seeing. But what's happening in rural America? You know what? Look, Juan, I want us to connect the dots in Chicago. Yeah. What's happening here is awful, but I think we need to connect the dots across the country, because since Gabby Giffords was shot in January of 2011, we've had 60 mass shootings, and no one wants to connect those dots, and I want us to do that because we have too much violence in America, wherever it is.
I'm glad to connect dots, but when I connect dots, I go Chicago, I go Philadelphia, I go Baltimore, I go Houston, and you know what? I see black people killing black people. That's what I see, and I don't know how you can avoid seeing this.
No, I'm not avoiding that, but I think that you're doing a great deal of avoidance, Juan, because you are avoiding what's happening in the broader country. What about the mass killings?
But why doesn't the black establishment talk about these deplorable crimes that are happening?
Why can't we do both? Why can't we do both? Why are you ignoring what's happening in the rest of the country?
No, I'm not ignoring it, but if you want to just look at pure numbers of deaths, I don't think there's any question it's black on black crime. If you want to talk about mass murders, as it was pointed out in that editorial by Carol Marin, you had what was it about? I forget the exact number of people who died in Aurora, Colorado, but that doesn't match a weekend in Chicago.
But I'm looking at raw numbers, four deaths per 100,000 people, according to Northwestern University study.
Juan,
look, we have a violence problem in America. You know, it's not just that.
Come on. Look, Santita, you know that includes suicides, accidental deaths. Come on, that's what the Northwestern. So that's not what's going on in Chicago.
Juan,
you know what?
Wait a minute.
Hold on, let her respond.
Okay, I apologize. Some psychologists are calling these homicides really suicides in reverse. I want us to have an educated conversation about what is happening. Because you know what? 2 minutes. I'm being honest. Wait a minute. Hold it. I live on the south side of Chicago. I live here.
Right. So I'm saying what's going on in the rural community is suicide. All right. Let's get Deneen in here.
Chicago, you have a rural community.
In the urban communities, as I said, the black establishment is ignoring the deplorable conditions of these communities. This is all economic. It's economic driven. If people had jobs, you wouldn't have all this violence and individuals selling drugs and get involved in gangs.
But Santita said that.
But we're also talking about how there are black liberals who are not addressing the fact that the progressive policies have failed the black community. Poor education, high unemployment, unemployment among black youth is over 36%. These numbers are deplorable.
All right, Santita, one last thing to say to you. Nobody's trying to pathologize. No one's trying to pathologize anybody. But just out of love and concern, don't you think we should say something about this? And don't you think President Obama should say something about it?
He absolutely should.
And please, and let me apologize to Deneen for stepping over her.
No, it's okay. We know this is all in the spirit of concern. All of us are having a real important debate. Ladies, thank you so much for doing it.